So I recently got invited to play some Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 by Warhorse Gaming. Apparently we were among the first to play this near final build, and let's just say it was a very fun day. So for those who don't know what Kingdom Come Deliverance is, it's a unique kind of RPG in that it portrays the medieval era as realistically as possible. It's not fantasy, there's no magic, it's intentionally very grounded in its setting and even in its gameplay. Even the story is based on real events taking place in 1403 Bohemia, or what you might know as modern-day Czech Republic. Now, for a little context, I actually had a bit of trouble getting into the first Kingdom Come Deliverance. I did start it, but never ultimately finished it. I did love what it was going for, but it was just really rough around the edges. But at the same time, I could tell there was the onset of brilliance here. I knew what they were going for. I could feel the potential of it. It was akin to what I felt when I played, Witcher 1, Assassin's Creed 1, Mass Effect 1. They felt like labors of love that were still a bit in like the prototypical stage. Those were all games whose rough edges were eventually polished and made killer sequels. And that's what I think Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is. The developers let me start a new game and play 6.5 hours of it straight through, no guidance whatsoever. They just dropped me into the world. And with the sequel, I had no trouble becoming immediately engaged, and that engagement stayed all the way through my entire play session. And they quite literally let me play however I want, except going past a certain story point, which I couldn't reach anyway because it was so far along in the campaign. Now, Warhorse Gaming was also kind enough to sponsor today's video, but it must be emphasized they had no editorial control whatsoever. I made that very clear in my email exchanges with them. All opinions in this video are my own, both praises and criticisms. The only thing they made sure of is that I didn't spoil anything important and that I adhere to the embargo date. That's about it. I say this because I'm about to give this game a lot of compliments, but it comes from a place of genuinely feeling that this game's really freaking good. If you loved Kingdom Come Deliverance 1, this sequel essentially feels like everything you could have wanted out of a Kingdom Come Deliverance sequel. All of the improvements are there, the narrative is continued, it's everything you loved, but more and more refined. Immediately striking about this game is just how gorgeous it looks. This is how I saw the first game in my head, but then I actually went back and replayed the first game for a bit, and the graphical differences were immediately noticeable. This feels like a generational leap forward. The graphics, the animations, the models, textures, lighting, all a huge step up. Characters in particular just look less stiff and mannequin-like. They're just much more lifelike in their movements and facial features and animations. And there's just this hyper-realistic visual approach that this game goes for that really boosts the authenticity of the setting and how it's brought to life. Even sound design is treated really authentically. There are no exaggerated sound effects. Like how, say, when you shoot somebody in a video game, you get those bits of sound effects that serve as feedback. Well, in this game, when you shoot a bow and arrow, if you think about it in real life, you wouldn't hear the arrow strike if the target is far away. And so at times it can feel like some sound effects are missing, but actually the sound effects in this game are just portrayed realistically. And that commitment to realism and almost like a simulation level of attention to detail is something that permeates throughout the entire game. Now, in the first game, they tried to go for that, but I think that there were aspects of the sound design in the first game that felt a bit hollow. I think in this game, sound design just feels improved, sound feels better mixed. It just feels like there's a lot more going on auditorily that kind of makes the surroundings feel just more realistic. But more than anything, the visuals is where this game really shines as far as presentation is concerned. The vistas are genuinely jaw-dropping. It's a world filled to the brim with flora and fauna, walking through forests in particular and looking up and seeing the light peek through the canopy. And how true to life it all looks, it's genuinely stunning stuff. Made all the more impressive by the fact that the performance in this game is actually very smooth, at least based on the build that I played here. I feel like the first game, despite looking worse than the sequel, runs worse. Like I could immediately tell that Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 was a far better optimized game, and it's not even out yet. There were maybe a handful of micro hitches in the frame rate here and there, but that was very sparse and at no point gameplay disrupting. The visuals are further carried by how much of a step up the cinematics look in the sequel compared to the first game. Just the cinematography of this game and in the way the story is visually presented, all of that feels like it's seen a significant improvement from the first game. And the story setup itself is really great, which is what immediately drew me to the game, like immediately made me care about what was going on. It follows directly after the events of the first game. The protagonist, Henry, accompanies nobleman Hans as his bodyguard to deliver a peace letter to another noble. An ambush derails that task, and eventually they're left with nothing. Nobody believes who they are because they've lost their banners, so they essentially have to work their way towards sending that message, and that's kind of the setup. But where the narrative takes me, I'll obviously have to play the final game to find out. But because of how well the dialogue in this game is written, how good the voice acting is, how likable the characters are, just great writing in this game that mixes comedy and drama really well, all of that made me immediately invested in what was going on. The two protagonists in particular, Henry and Hans, their chemistry, their banter, you can immediately feel their history, their relationship, and watching these two interact with each other is alone one of the most entertaining parts of this entire experience from what little of this game I played. The story, writing, and dialogue of this game is so entertaining that I could honestly just watch this as a movie, except it's actually a fully interactive, playable experience. And it's not just the main characters, it feels like all of the side characters you meet, all of them feel like they're fully fleshed out, like they all have a story, they have a place in the world, and the world in general is just really rich with details. When you go to towns and settlements and cities, they really do feel alive. There's just a lot of like activities going on, like really cool idle animations and variety of them that makes it feel like nothing is fully static. Now, the open world, just from what I played, I can tell is absolutely massive. The developers actually detail exactly how much larger than the first game it is. It's 2 total maps with a combined size of roughly 25 kilometers or 15.5 miles, so that's twice the size of the first game. Now, the intro portion of the game was kind of on rails, but the game eventually lets you loose, and once you're in the open world, aside from kind of pointing you towards the main campaign points of interest, you're free to do whatever you want. And the world really does already feel like it's chock full of quests that you can encounter organically. It doesn't feel like the game just kind of dots the map with a bunch of icons. It feels like as you explore, things just organically happen around you, so there's a genuine sense of discovery. And all of the quests kind of nudge you to all of these different locales where you find more quests that nudge you to all of these other locales where you will find more quests. Sometimes certain quests will have you loop back around to old characters you've met, and then when you talk to that character again, maybe you'll find that circumstances have changed for them. So, for example, there's this herbalist that you meet in the intro portion of the game. She nurses Henry and Hans after they were injured during the ambush. Really liked all the interactions with her, but I figured that after that part of the questline was done, I'd kind of never see her again. But then I started doing the side quests involving finding my dog, who kind of got lost in the ambush, and then it took me back around to asking the herbalist about whether she's seen a dog, and then I learned that her daughter, who also helped with nursing the two characters back, had suddenly gone missing, and so now there's this new quest line from an old character that I had met, and it never felt like I was guided by map markers. It just felt like quests organically led to more quests. Exploration just led to you discovering things, encountering people and their circumstances, so that was just a good feeling. That's what I want open worlds to feel like. Even when you fast travel, you're sometimes interrupted by ambushes or by characters who are in need of help. You name it, there are just a lot of these like emergent events that happen in the open world. And then none of the quests felt like they were menial tasks, like they were a waste of time. Every single quest felt like they had a fully fleshed out plot, a fully fleshed out arc with characters you are invested in, rich and compelling dialogue, and again, a lot of credit to how good the writing and the performances are in this game. There are also a lot of branching paths in the narrative. There are many ways that quests can play out. I could already feel that in the main quest, where there was this wedding that I had to get to try to meet up with the noble who I'm trying to deliver the letter to, and there were 2 ways I could do that. I could either talk to a miller or a blacksmith who have information about this, and depending on which one you choose, you're taken to different quest lines essentially, so you have different paths towards the same destination. And there's also variety in how you can choose to approach these quests, so you could go for stealthier options or more of like a head-on frontal assault option. And then looking and discussing with other players, I could see how we all took very different approaches and how we went by things in very different orders. So for example, there was this one player who focused more on persuasion skills, so they managed to get things like the horse very early, whereas I couldn't do that, so I actually had to get money to buy my own horse. And then there was this one quest where I was being hunted down. I ended up fighting and killing the assailants, while another player managed to actually resolve things without violence. And these are apparently characters who can come back later if you don't kill them, according to the developers, and they might actually play a role in later quests. Yeah, there's just this genuine sense of freedom with this game, and the game also does feel very reactive, not only in the way the narrative is actually potentially shaped by your decisions, but also just even minute details. Like, so for example, the herbalist NPC I was talking about, if I went for a more violent approach when assailants came in, she knew to ask for me to bury dead bodies, and I was even impressed by little details like the way I took one of her weapons. I took like an axe from her in order to fend off the assailants because I didn't have a weapon on me, and she recognized that and asked me to put the axe back because she needs it.
For a start, you can leave me that axe and spade. We can't manage without them.
Yes, of course.
It feels like NPCs actually know what's going on around them. It just feels like the developers accounted for every scenario when it comes to how NPCs react to your actions. Now, I will say that there were times where dialogue choices weren't what I expected. They were written a certain way, but they came off as another way. So there's this one scenario where I thought I was offering help based on how the text read, but then Henry's dialogue was actually a lot more aggressive and almost like disrespectful. So there were some dialogue choices where I'm like, that's not what I would have chosen if I knew that's how it was going to come out. But yeah, like in the first game, there is a whole persuasion system, and there are different approaches that you can take marked by icons that indicate what that approach is. And it really does feel like you have to be very considerate about the way you behave and the way you speak to people, and it's just a general sense of methodicalness to the gameplay of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Everything just feels kind of slow and deliberate. You're not some overpowered action hero. You're just a dude in this vast world. You're just this little cog in this giant machine is what it feels like. And so much of this game focuses on simulating what that feels like to be in this world, in this medieval setting that is incredibly authentic. And so everything methodically reflects that. Like, look at the potion crafting and weaponsmithing mini-games. With potion crafting, you actually have to, like, read the recipe and, like, take all the individual ingredients and pour them into the right containers and do the whole process. Same with weaponsmithing. You actually have to go through the smithing process that you would see in real life. They just went all out on this stuff. And it does feel like the number of activities has been expanded. There are various mini-games you can engage in, like dice games and the like, alongside the crafting mini-games. The simulation aspect also comes in the way there are some survival elements, like how you have to manage hunger, sleep, applying bandages for bleeding, so on and so forth. A lot of it which was inherited from the first game. You even have to manage things like your smell and the state of your equipment. So for example, if I carry dead corpses, the smell of death will linger on me and people will smell that. If I engage in a lot of combat and I'm bloodied, people react to that. But sometimes that can be beneficial, as bloodied equipment does increase your intimidation stats. So if you want to intimidate somebody through dialogue, being bloodied is actually a good thing. Even the way equipment works is so methodical. There's so many layers to the armor in a way that reflects real life. So for example, you have to equip a coif before you equip a helmet and stuff like that. I feel like a lot of equipment systems have become so kind of diluted and reduced in terms of the pieces that you can equip, but in this game, every piece is kind of represented in the way that you'd expect them to work in real life. And then there's combat, which is equally methodical in the way you have to approach it. Like in the first game, the way it works is you have to choose directional inputs before you swing your sword. And right out of the gate, I will say that combat is noticeably improved in how it feels. I decided to boot up the first game at home after playing this build of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. And yeah, it was really hard to go back to the first game's combat. Compared to the first game, everything just feels a little more streamlined. So like stab has its own button now, for example, instead of it being its own directional input. So you have less directions to manage. The way they've animated the attacks just add a greater sense of weight. There's a better sense of just flow and control. And they implemented this parry mechanic that's very welcome and makes combat just a little more reactive for the players. Now, with all that said, I will say the one aspect of this game that I'm still a little iffy about is the combat. It is better than the first game, but I'd say it still felt somewhat unwieldy at times. Now, I did use keyboard and mouse as my input method, and based on my experience, aiming with directional attacks with the mouse just felt kind of finicky, not always accurate. I didn't feel like I was fully in control of what direction my swings were going towards, so I'm curious to see if playing with a controller will end up alleviating this, as those inputs become a lot more clear when you use an analog stick. Also, things like switching between targets when you're confronting more than one enemy felt a bit finicky. So yeah, combat, it is much more functional than the first game. I personally couldn't stand how janky the first game's combat felt, or how unwieldy it felt. In the second game, I feel like I can get by with it, so it's a good thing that they took a lot of feedback and applied it to Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. You can tell that they learned a lot, and they definitely did improve combat, but it was still the most awkward part of my experience with Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. It is definitely not the best first-person combat I've played, though it could just be a matter of me getting used to the combat, because I didn't get to engage in a whole lot of combat in my 6+ hours. Combat encounters were few and far between, so maybe if I get used to it and I understand the flow of it as I play more of the game, maybe then I will have something different to say. But for now, the combat still felt just unwieldy enough where I still am not fully sold on it. But again, time will tell. Same thing with progression. I didn't get to experience too much of the game's progression. I did unlock a few perks here and there. So you level up skills in this game by doing the actions associated with those skills, kind of like how it works in Skyrim. And then when you level those skills up, you spend perks on them. So say you want to get better at melee combat, do more melee combat and get XP for melee combat. If you want to be a better marksman, then shoot more bows and crossbows. If you want to be better at, sneaking or lockpicking, do all of that, and those skills will level up over time, and you can unlock things that allow you to use those skills more effectively. I'd have to play longer to feel the effects of those perks, but based on the descriptions that I saw, they do feel like they will have a substantial impact, but I'll have to play more of the game before I can say for sure that that's the case. But a lot of progression is also done through the equipment that you wear and that you loot and find. There's a decent amount of equipment management and weight management and having to offload or sell stuff. There was that satisfaction of finding more powerful equipment that did have an impact in how much longer I could last in combat and how much damage I could deal and get rid of enemies. I'll also have to wait until the final game to see just how polished this game truly is, but so far, I encountered very few bugs. There was like one time where an NPC clipped through the playable character during dialogue. There was another time where a weird collision situation led to me falling to my death, and given how unforgiving this game's save system can be, that one occasion was kind of frustrating. And then this one time, the game was just a bit unclear in terms of which bed I was supposed to use to sleep in, and so I accidentally trespassed and committed a crime, and so I just didn't know what was going on. But moments like these were few and far between. Already this is feeling like a far more technically polished experience than the first game's launch. But yeah, I mean, even after 6 hours, it just felt like I barely scratched the surface of this game. I was told that this is roughly an 80 to 100 hours long RPG. It's a game filled with quests, each that are unique and handcrafted with a lot of outcomes, lots of ways your journey can play out based on your choices, so it'll also end up being really replayable. That's at least what's advertised, and I do believe them based on what I've played so far at least. But yeah, the general sense that I got, even after 6.5 hours of non-stop Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, was that I didn't want my time with the game to end. And I can just genuinely feel the labor of love that was put into this game. It's one of those games that feels like a dream project for the creators and the developers, and therefore it will turn out to be a dream project for players. This brand of RPG, this authentic, medieval, grounded kind of RPG, feels like something Warhorse Gaming is setting the bar for. It feels uniquely them. And I have a feeling that if Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 delivers on the potential that the first 6+ hours is showing, then this sequel could be what starts to propel them to the status of the likes of CD Projekt, your Larians, your FromSofts. All they have to do is just execute on it, and I really do feel like the execution of the sequel is already far and above what the first game accomplished just from the first 6+ hours that I played of this title. But do keep in mind that ultimately it's just 6 hours. I'd have to play the whole game to say for sure. But I genuinely do have a really good feeling about this one. I genuinely think you should keep an eye out for this game. But as always, wait for reviews before you make a purchase decision. But so far, so good. I had a really good time with this game. I definitely plan to review this game, so look forward to a final deliberation on the title once I've really seen everything it has to offer. In the meantime, though, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are. Are you looking forward to it, and what does this game need to do for it to deliver for you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.
O dentes fortuna juvat!